Women of Reddit. What did he do that made you realize he never loved you? Story 1. I found out my ex left me for my sister while I was recovering from a hysterectomy. Yeah, go ahead and reread that. I had to. I wasn't recovering from some routine procedure either. I had cancer. The hysterectomy wasn't optional. It was one of those life flips upside down situations where you're trying to process a diagnosis, surgery, fear, grief, and a future that suddenly looks nothing like the one you planned. I was barely making it from the bed to the couch without feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Meanwhile, apparently my ex was busy workshopping new ways to become the worst person I've ever met. And not with some random woman, my sister. My actual sister, the woman who shared my childhood, stole my clothes growing up, and somehow eventually decided stealing my boyfriend would be a fun little side quest. People always ask how I reacted when I found out. Honestly, I just sat there. No dramatic screaming, no throwing things, no movie scene meltdown. I think my brain looked at the situation, looked at the available information, and simply said, absolutely not. We're processing this later. I was already dealing with cancer. My emotional hard drive was full. The rage came later, then the dark humor, because at some point the whole thing became so unbelievably awful that it almost wrapped back around into absurdity. Like, wow. While I was fighting to stay healthy, these two clowns were apparently auditioning for the role of Human Garbage 1 and Human Garbage 2. The part that hurt most wasn't even losing him. It was realizing that while I was lying in a hospital bed scared for my future, the two people who should have been in my corner were busy betraying me. That kind of thing changes you. But here's the funny part. And by funny, I mean deeply irritating. Years later, I barely think about them anymore. Cancer tried to take me out. I survived. Their relationship eventually exploded exactly the way everyone predicted. And now they're just two embarrassing chapters in a story that turned out to be a lot bigger than either of them. Imagine throwing away your integrity for a relationship built on betrayal. Couldn't be me. Story 2. My dad was in the ICU, hooked up to what felt like every machine modern medicine has ever invented, and I was basically living off vending machine coffee and pure panic. We'd been together 4 years. 4 whole years. Long enough that you'd think basic human compassion would have accidentally rubbed off on him at some point, so I called my boyfriend, exhausted, scared out of my mind, trying not to completely fall apart. And this man, this grown adult with a fully functioning mouth, goes, just because your father is dying doesn't mean I need to stop living my life. I swear my brain blue screened. Like, hold on. Let me make sure I heard that correctly. My father is actively dying, and your biggest concern is that my family emergency is somehow inconveniencing your social calendar? That's the hill we're choosing today? I actually gasped. Not dramatic movie gasped. Real gasped. The kind where your body reacts before your brain catches up. Then I said, your wish is granted, and hung up. That was it. Relationship over. Done. Finished. Sent directly to the emotional recycling bin. The wild part? He probably expected me to apologize for being upset. Some people genuinely think empathy is a subscription service they're not paying for. Looking back, that sentence told me everything. Not that he hated me exactly. Worse, he simply didn't care. And honestly, hatred at least requires effort. My dad was fighting for his life, and this guy was worried about missing out on whatever stupid plans he had that weekend. Incredible. Truly a masterclass in accidentally confessing you're a terrible person. Story 3. My husband asked for an open marriage while I was in treatment for stage 3 breast cancer. And somehow that's not even the craziest part. We'd been together almost 15 years. 15 years. We had a child together. We'd built an entire life together. At the time, I'd just finished chemo a couple weeks earlier. If you've never been through chemo, imagine your body getting mugged by its own survival plan. I was exhausted, emotionally fried, still trying to figure out what my future even looked like. We'd actually gone on a vacation to celebrate our wedding anniversary. You know, because apparently I was still operating under the assumption that anniversaries were for reconnecting with your spouse, instead of auditioning for emotional devastation. Radiation was scheduled to start a couple weeks later, so there we were, sitting in a hotel room. Anniversary trip, cancer patient, 15-year marriage. And this man looked at me and said he wanted an open marriage. I genuinely think my brain left the room for a minute. Like, hold on. Let's review the agenda, cancer, chemo recovery, upcoming radiation, parenting, marriage. And your contribution to this discussion is, have you considered me sleeping with other people? Fantastic. Amazing timing. No notes. At the time, I was so emotionally exhausted that I didn't even fully process how cruel it was. I spent months trying to understand it, trying to fix it, trying to save something that had already been dead for years. Because the truth is, the signs had been there long before that hotel room. He never said, "I love you," anymore. Not unless I said it first. Sometimes not even then. He stopped hugging me, stopped kissing me. If I tried to kiss his cheek, he'd pull away. If I tried to show affection, he'd react like I was handing him a wet sock. Everything felt unwanted, forced, awkward. I kept telling myself it was stress, life, marriage, cancer, anything except the obvious answer. Because the obvious answer hurt too much. 8 months later, I finally left. And then he admitted it. He told me he wasn't in love with me anymore. Hadn't been for a long time. Had actually resented me for years. And honestly, that confession didn't shock me nearly as much as it should have. Because by then, I'd already spent months untangling reality from excuses. The hardest part wasn't realizing he didn't love me. The hardest part was realizing how little I loved myself during that period. I genuinely believed nobody else would want me. Cancer does weird things to your self-image. So does years of rejection from the person who's supposed to love you. I thought I was lucky anyone tolerated me at all. That's what being emotionally worn down does. Your standards get lower and lower until you're grateful for crumbs and calling it a meal. Now I'm working with professionals. I'm healthier, stronger, actually healing instead of just surviving. And sometimes I wish I'd left sooner. Way sooner. Story 4. Back in college, I had a kidney stone. And if you've never had one, congratulations on winning a lottery you didn't know existed, because kidney stones are one of those medical conditions that sound mildly annoying until your body decides to recreate a medieval torture device internally. I was in agony, not uncomfortable, not I don't feel good, agony. The pain medication I'd been prescribed wasn't touching it anymore. I was crying, shaking, nauseated. The kind of pain where your entire world shrinks down to surviving the next 5 minutes. So I called my boyfriend, not because I wanted attention, not because I wanted sympathy. I needed help. A ride to the emergency room. That was it. My roommates were in class. Nobody else was available. I didn't feel safe driving myself. I'd already had one ambulance ride and desperately wanted to avoid another. So I called the person who supposedly loved me. He answered. I explained what was happening, and this man got annoyed. Actually annoyed. Turns out I'd interrupted something very important. Swimming laps. I'm serious. Apparently my kidney attempting to escape my body was conflicting with his cardio schedule. Then he informed me he had plans afterward. Some project, some people he was meeting, whatever. I honestly don't remember because at that point I was busy trying not to throw up from pain. I begged him. Actually begged. And that's the part that makes me cringe now, because nobody should have to beg their partner for emergency medical help. His response? I'm not rearranging my day to take you to the emergency room where they're not going to do anything for you anyway. Then he hung up, like I was a telemarketer. I remember staring at my phone thinking there had to be some misunderstanding. Surely this wasn't real. Surely if someone you love calls you crying and says they need emergency medical care, your first instinct isn't to protect your lap swimming schedule. But apparently it was. So I did it myself. I gathered my stuff, dragged myself to my car, and drove, crying, dry heaving, trying not to pass out, trying not to vomit, trying not to crash. Honestly, looking back, it's insane I even attempted it. I got to the emergency room, and here's the fun part. Remember how he said they wouldn't do anything? Yeah, about that. The doctors admitted me into the hospital immediately. Turns out the stone was stuck. It wasn't passing on its own. I needed surgery. Actual surgery, scheduled for the next day. So not only was he cruel, he was confidently wrong. A devastating combination. The thing that really gets me isn't even the phone call anymore. It's what happened afterward. Nothing. No text, no call, no did you make it okay? No how are you feeling? No what's happening? Nothing. This man had enough concern for me to dedicate exactly 0 seconds to finding out whether I was alive. He was busy. Remember? Important activities. Looking back, I spent years focusing on the wrong part of the story. I thought the lesson was that he refused to drive me. It wasn't. The lesson was what happened after, because people make mistakes. People freeze. People react badly. People have terrible moments, but most people eventually call. They check in, they worry, they feel guilty, They care. This man simply moved on with his day, as if the conversation never happened, as if I never happened. And honestly, that told me everything. The surgery hurt less than that realization. At least the surgeons were trying to remove the thing causing me pain. He was trying to keep his lane reservation at the pool. Story 5. I spent years earning my black belt in Kung Fu. Years. Not, I took a few classes and got a certificate. Years. I'm talking bruises, sore muscles, missed weekends, endless drills, failures, improvements, and showing up even when I absolutely did not feel like it. Anybody who's ever trained seriously in a martial art knows exactly what I'm talking about. A black belt isn't a single day. It's thousands of days stacked on top of each other. Eventually, testing day arrived. The big one, the final hurdle. An all-day event filled with forms, drills, sparring, weapon demonstrations, conditioning, and every skill we'd spent years developing. By hour 5, my body felt like it had been hit by a truck. By hour 6, the truck had apparently backed up and hit me again just to be safe. I asked my husband to come watch, not because I needed validation. I just wanted the person I loved to be there, to cheer me on, to share the moment. He showed up after work near the very end, caught a few kicking drills, saw maybe the final stretch of the test. Then the masters met, reviewed everything, and unanimously awarded our belts. I did it. Years of work, done. Black belt, one of the proudest moments of my life. The first thing out of his mouth, I'm disappointed. Not congratulations, not I'm proud of you, not wow, you worked hard for this. Disappointed. Apparently he'd watched me struggle through the final kicking drills after 6 straight hours of testing and decided that meant I almost didn't deserve it. Then he dropped the participation trophy comment. Because obviously when people spend years training and then survive an all-day examination, that's exactly the same thing as getting a ribbon for showing up. Makes perfect sense. No notes. I tried to let it go. I really did. Because when you're with someone like that, you become a professional excuse manufacturer. Maybe he doesn't understand martial arts. Maybe he meant something else. Maybe he's having a bad day. Meanwhile, my accomplishment was getting autopsied in real time. Still trying to salvage the evening, I suggested we go celebrate. Dinner. A nice meal. Maybe a chance to enjoy what had just happened. Instead, I got a 3-hour TED Talk from a man who knew absolutely nothing about what I'd just accomplished. The entire dinner became a rant. According to him, martial arts had lost its meaning. Belts didn't matter. Standards were too low. Nobody earned anything anymore. Kung Fu wasn't what it used to be, blah, blah, blah. And somewhere in the middle of that lecture, I realized something. This wasn't about martial arts. It wasn't about standards. It wasn't about belts. Because if he'd actually cared, he'd have spent 5 minutes asking me what the test was like, how I felt, what I'd overcome, what it meant to me. Instead, he spent the entire night explaining why my accomplishment wasn't worth celebrating. That's when I should have left. Not because of the black belt, because of what happened afterward. Because people who love you don't hear your victory and immediately start searching for ways to downgrade it. They don't watch you climb a mountain and then complain about the quality of the view. Looking back, I think he hated seeing me proud of myself. Some people are comfortable with your hobbies right up until they become achievements. Right up until they become proof that you're capable, disciplined, and growing. Then suddenly they become critics. Funny how that works. I wish I'd walked away that night. Would have saved me years of heartbreak. But life doesn't always hand out lessons in a way that's easy to recognize. Sometimes the lesson arrives disguised as a miserable dinner after one of the best days of your life. At least I eventually learned it. And unlike that relationship, the black belt is still something I'm proud of. One of those things lasted, the other didn't. Funny how the participation trophy survived longer than the marriage. And if I've learned anything since then, it's this. When someone consistently turns your happiest moments into their opportunity to tear you down, believe them the first time. They're telling you exactly where you stand. The mistake is thinking they'll eventually stop. Story 6. My ex got up for work at 5 a.m. every morning. I had a full-time job too. Mine just started later. So naturally, like any normal couple sharing a bed, I had one very modest request. Please stop body slamming the mattress before sunrise. That's it. That's the whole request. Not world peace. Not a kidney. Just maybe don't launch yourself onto the bed like you're testing earthquake-resistant furniture while I'm still asleep. Every morning he'd get dressed, stomp around, make noise, and then right before leaving he'd sit down on the bed to put on his shoes. Except sit down isn't really accurate. The man would drop onto the mattress with the force of a medieval siege weapon. I'd jolt awake immediately, every time. So I talked to him about it, politely, multiple times. Hey, when you sit on the bed like that, it wakes me up. Can you put your shoes on somewhere else? Can you just be a little gentler? Simple. Reasonable. Very easy problem to solve. At least that's what I thought. Instead, it got worse. Not better. Worse. The impact became harder. More deliberate, more dramatic, like he was trying out for the Olympic mattress slamming team. And because I was apparently the last person on earth to understand what was happening, I kept assuming he just wasn't getting it. Maybe I wasn't explaining it clearly enough. Maybe he forgot. Maybe he didn't realize how much it affected me. Maybe. Meanwhile, this man understood perfectly. That's the part that still gets me. He knew exactly what I meant. The evidence was right there. I explained the problem. His behavior immediately changed, just in the wrong direction, but my brain couldn't process that because I genuinely didn't believe people operated that way. I thought if someone loved you, even imperfectly, they wouldn't intentionally make your life harder over something so small. Turns out I was giving him way too much credit. Looking back, that stupid bed thing was just one example. There were hundreds, thousands, tiny little digs, tiny little lies, tiny little acts designed to inconvenience me, upset me, or make me feel guilty. Nothing dramatic enough to explain to other people. Nothing dramatic enough to point at and say, see, that's the problem. Just endless paper cuts. Death by a million microscopic acts of hostility. And every single time, I'd somehow find a way to blame myself. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm asking for too much. Maybe I'm overreacting. Meanwhile, this guy was conducting a one-man psychological warfare campaign before sunrise. The craziest realization after the relationship ended wasn't that he was cruel. It was realizing how much energy I'd spent trying to understand behavior that made no sense because I was assuming good intention. Once I stopped assuming good intentions, everything suddenly clicked into place. The bed, the lies, the guilt trips, the weird little acts of sabotage, all of it. People always think hatred looks dramatic. Screaming, cheating, explosive fights. Sometimes it looks like a man deliberately waking you up at 5 a.m. every day because he knows it bothers you, and then acting confused when you're upset. That's the part I was too naive to understand. A loving person hears, "This hurts me," and tries to stop. A resentful person hears, "This hurts me," and takes notes.